Good morning from foggy San Francisco. So I'm presenting a paper we did which reviews the literature and analyzes the question, could the fourth industrial revolution bring inclusive transformation to Africa? And the reason why we did this paper was because there's been a lot of literature on this, but the problem with that literature is it's really not particularly been asking the question that African policymakers want to know the answer to, which is, it forecasts job gains and losses using the famous Frey and Osborne method, and it also looks at potential gains and it analyzes what investments and policies were needed. But Africa needs an economic transformation, that goes without saying for this audience. And so our question really is, will the fourth industrial revolution technology actually solve any current and urgent productivity issues for African production units? And we think that's the important question that needs to be asked. And the second important question is, are the conditions in place for it to be adopted? Why or why not? And I think it's well known that there's a lot of production technology already that production units haven't adopted. I cite Magruder, who did a really good survey of why a lot of technology isn't adopted in African agriculture, because farmers don't see a benefit. They don't see it solving a current and urgent productivity issue given the risks, the market risks, for example. And Verhoeven did a paper, the same thing on the industrial production. And so then once we finish those two questions, we ask, if adopted, what might be the future employment effects? And another thing we do is we analyze the formal and the informal sector separately, because as everyone knows, a substantial portion, depending on the country, from 60 to 80% of the labor force in Africa, including in agriculture, works informally. And the point about informal work is that the question about technology adoption is quite different than for someone who's, and the employment question in terms of what might result are also quite different. And most people who analyze this question don't consider that. Okay, so we have only a few minutes, so I'm just going to go straight to the findings. That's enough about our methodology. So we looked at we focused on private sector production units. So we didn't really look at the public sector at all in terms of, say, education or health, really. We looked at private sector production units. In agriculture, as I mentioned, there are really long-standing issues of risk and land tenure that have already hampered technology adoption. And we think they will hamper, for example, the adoption of fourth industrial revolution technology. So there are a lot of papers out that say, look, digital agriculture, precision agriculture, this, that, et cetera. And probably there are some large commercial farms that will adopt that. And there are papers out that talk about drones being able to spray trees much faster than people, et cetera, et cetera. And certainly sensors and all that electronic technology, Internet of Things that could do soil sensing. And it has lots of potential. And there still is lots of potential to get better weather information, and that might help. But the main point is, we think it will be difficult for most smallholder farmers to adopt this technology. But if it were to be adopted without help, serious help from government, and I'm not sure that help is there. If it's adopted, the technology should increase farmer earnings and not, of course, have employment effects. And it could have positive externalities. Now, in manufacturing, which is, we didn't look at construction that much. In terms of the industrial sector, we looked at manufacturing, mining, and energy. And in manufacturing, robots have an absolute advantage over people in many tasks. I mean, that's just a fact. And that's part of a trend of the manufacturing becoming more capital intensive. It has been a drive for quality. And so we think competitiveness concerns will push the adoption. And that's actually a problem for Africa, because that means low wages are not a source of comparative advantage as they were for previous industrializing countries. So we don't think factor prices will play a role. And we think whether, though, countries will be able to export manufacturing depends on improved logistics. And also finance for this technology is a big issue. We think there could be 3D printing and small scale manufacturing for Africans producing for a local regional market. We don't see a lot of big job gains or losses, in contrast to other people who've, McKinsey and whatever, that have made detailed calculations. And finally, informally supplied services, we see some possibility for the technology to help create more formal jobs in tourism, travel, transport, wholesale and retail trade like e-commerce. And so, you don't need so many logistics, right? So we see that as an area where formal jobs could expand, better jobs could expand, and this could support structural transformation. We see the informal service sector has long-standing constraints to technology adoption, so we don't see a lot of technology adoption there. Platforms, of course, have some potential to help suppliers find customers, customers find suppliers of services, but we don't see it leading to mass formalization either. And just to conclude, there are issues that have to be addressed by countries in order to get this technology adopted. And these are long-standing issues: infrastructure, ICT service regulation, ICT services, digital services, internet and mobile phones are very high priced in Africa. And a lot of this has to do with the lack of competition and regulation. Trade policy often treats this technology as a luxury good, ongoing red tape issues. There are cybersecurity issues. We finally, on the skills, we argue, a lot of people say, okay, governments, you need to train right now for this technology. And we note that the majority of workers in African countries still actually need quality primary and secondary education. And if money is diverted away from that task, it could lead to inequality. And so we discussed the fact that a lot of these specialized skills will need to be privately financed. So in sum, our prediction is, yes, fourth industrial revolution could support economic transformation in Africa. We don't see large job losses. We see the pre-COVID trajectory of transformation, which was advancing slowly, but it was advancing well, could change slightly upward and could improve slightly, but then informal will be normal. Okay, that's the end.
Great, thank you very much, Louise. Any questions, please feel free to raise the little yellow hand or just jump in straight away. Callum.
Thank you. I disagree a little bit with some of the more pessimistic elements of the final slide, because I think whilst it's true that for some of the more shall we say, some of the industries further from the technological frontier, African countries often do over-regulate and over-red tape and bureaucratize. But actually, there's a lot of findings that that's not the case for the most modern, shall we say, very disaggregated, very decentralized technologies. And a lot of people actually think that African countries, or at least some African countries, are very ahead of the curve in terms of mobile money, not to have onerous regulation on cryptocurrency apps, other apps of the type which is particularly important for these things, kind of group borrowing apps, microfinance apps, and these kind of things which people use to buy these agricultural technologies. So I wonder actually if there may be the possibility for Africa to have a head start over some other developing regions. And similarly, because African countries haven't developed the sort of real huge production line style manufacturing that have been present in some Asian economies, I wonder if bizarrely that could actually perhaps insulate them a little better from robotics and from AI in manufacturing production, because of it would seem that those kind of very large scale assembly line style factories would be the most prone to being work.
So Callum, let me just interrupt you because we only have 2 minutes left in this whole seminar, but I completely agree with you that they won't have the manufacturing sector losses that rich countries had. I'm completely with you there. But on the and mobile money, you know, I guess what I would say is all of Africa is not Kenya. And so, you know, while mobile money has advanced quite a bit, there are many countries where less than half the population even has a mobile phone. So I guess there's Kenya and there's, you know, Guinea. And
I think that's overly pessimistic. I'm sorry, but you know, the average mobile money adoption rate in Africa is more than double that of any other continent. Now, in part, that's because of the lack of you know, formal financial account, you know, the formal financial inclusion.
Callum, I agree. And so I think that's helped a little bit, but you know, production is more than mobile money. That's just how you sell things. But e-commerce has advanced a lot during the pandemic, and so we're more optimistic about formally supplied services. Mobile money has helped informal sellers, the informal sector, sell more safely, and it's helped with platforms. But overall, we don't see a major change in the trajectory because the trajectory has been set by demographics and by where things start. In terms of the labor force expanding and the ability of the formal firms to grow and employ that labor force. I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, I would disagree about the trajectory being set because you know, this proliferation of not just mobile money, but certain other fintech services could not have been foreseen as little as 10 years ago. And you know, Africa has jumped to the frontier of this out of almost nowhere. And I don't see why this couldn't be the case.
But it hasn't really changed the structure of production and employment. That's my point.
Oh, I think we don't know that yet. I think that what you're also doing is looking into the future. And I think that's something that, you know,
enough.
Yeah.
Do you have any other questions? Annie, I saw you wrote a comment in the chat. Do you have a question to follow up?
Well, I think that it is one thing to just introduce new technology, whatever it's based on, in a place where there was nothing before. Of course, they'll adopt it if you offer it to them now. But when we talk about substitution, to start using things produced by AI in the place of things that they are used to produce themselves and to be human produced, there is a very strong double bias, positive bias towards the human product. And it comes on one side because of the natural human proximity, which is typical also for a Westerner, and also from the point of view of traditionalistic you know, propensities, which are documented in other aspects of innovation, especially for Africa. It is known that in health services, they have tried to introduce new, you know, modern medical solutions, and people have rejected them and kept going to the shaman for abortions and stuff like this. So this may affect the way that they perceive the products, even if these products manage to be produced by AI in the local economy. So this is not only on the supply side, but also on the demand side, there can be a backlash. And this is valid not only for Africa, but also other places in the world. It actually can be a very generalized effect, which is very much under appreciated in the literature. So I think that the point which Louise is making is quite important and is even stronger as a potential development.
We have a couple more minutes before the session ends.
Okay, you know, I agree, Annie, but I think what I would say is, as an economist, you know, my job is to analyze the economics of this technology. And I think that the economics of this technology, especially in informal sector, which is where the majority of people work, aren't strong in terms of technology adoption until I think these issues of access to broadband and mobile phones at a cheaper price and more reliable energy are really need to be addressed first. And I think, you know, all of this exhortation to kind of skill up and develop tertiary skills in this area, I think all this coding for girls is going to really run out of steam in terms of job effects. Many people report they're not using their digital skills on their jobs even today. Any other comments? Did the framework make sense to people to use this framework instead of the Frey and Osborne, for example?
Well, I think if we don't have any further questions or comments, people can start making their way back to the main room, where I believe the next presentation will start in 5 minutes.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, Louise. That was great.
The paper's posted, and we welcome comments. And Callum, it's good for you to push back, because it means we probably need to address this point about what mobile money has done for production. Okay, thanks very much. Bye.